Hello everybody, this is introduction into Drupal, but it's a special introduction. I just wanted to do an introduction that would cut the bullshit. If it cuts away some things that you needed there but is not there, I'm sorry about that. But actually I decided to break it into some smaller parts. This will be introduction into Drupal that will overview it as a CMS or CMF, and we'll have a overview of back end and front end and some look in the code base. So what Drupal is and how it differs from WordPress. Drupal is referred to as a CMS and a CMF at the same time. It is harder than WordPress. It has a steeper learning curve than WordPress. It's easier to start with WordPress, but also WordPress is very limiting. I heard Drupal referred to as a Linux of CMS. So if you say that WordPress is Mac OS, like I never heard WordPress compared to Mac OS, but I would compare it to Mac OS. It's very simple. It runs. It's very polished. But once you want to do things that it's not supporting to do, you will get into fighting it at every turn. I don't want to name it Windows because I will offend it, because I come from the culture where it's Windows must die stuff. So if I say some CMS is Windows, I will offend that CMS. So okay, it's Mac OS. And Drupal is Linux because it has a steeper learning curve, but you won't have to fight it in 99.5% of time. Sometimes you still have to fight it, but it's made to be as flexible as it can be. In fact, of course, there is a certain logic that you must know. Of course, the most flexible website, if you build it from scratch on PHP or some other language, then you can do just anything you want. Then, of course, there is a framework like Laravel or Symfony. Those frameworks, they give us very big boost to you and provide some already coded functionality that you would otherwise have to code yourself, like interaction with HTTP, some theming layer, usually some user authentication layer, some database interaction entities layer, and it just boosts you very, very strongly, but it also provides some very basic limit to you. The way how they do authentication, the way how they do database entities layers, it limits you. Then the next step would of course be content management framework, and this is something which Drupal is. In fact, Drupal is like a next step from web framework like Laravel and Symfony. In fact, Drupal is based on Symfony, but it goes one step further. So it gives you even more APIs. It gives you even more boost how you can build websites. But then there is a certain level where, so yeah, Drupal is more limiting than just using Symfony or just using Laravel. But then its logic is that it tries to provide a strong boost as it can without getting to the point where it would limit you very, very hard. Like if you build a website and you use WordPress, then you bump into hardships all the times. Like you have to provide content types. It's hard to not support it out of the box. There are different plugins that do that, and then they conflict with one another and stuff like that. But I'm not here to criticize WordPress. WordPress is 65% of internet, of CMS market, for a reason. Okay, so I'm not criticizing it. I'm just saying that Drupal has a niche. It's very flexible. It's based on Symfony, like I have already said, but it has a steep learning curve, and it's flexible because it doesn't go into making some presumptions that WordPress would make. Okay, so and it's called content management system sometimes because you can use it as a CMS to build websites for like end user, for business, for schools, for government, but it also can be used to build lower level things like microservices and REST API and stuff like that. It can also be used for that, though for microservices it would definitely be an overkill. Like it goes too far from CMF to be a good microservice platform. Like it has too much code, so to say. It's an overkill to be used for microservices. But there are use cases when you can still use it for that. Okay, so it's built on Symfony. It can be used for multi-purpose. Okay, so it has a very flexible field system built into core, and it has some very powerful and flexible functionality that was included in the core, but that is also not limiting, and we will look into that in some other lessons. But you can just know that it's very flexible and powerful, and at the same time its logic is to give a boost without limiting you. The logic there is it's using PHP, the most modern PHP. Actually, there was one crazy thing which I saw. Excuse me for being a little bit erratic here, but I saw when I was looking for comparison between Python and Django and Laravel and Symfony for performance, I saw that some websites, if you check that, they're crazy. They're saying that Django is faster than Symfony and Laravel because it's written in Python and Python is faster. Now, this is bullshit. Like, I have seen it repeated on a number of websites that do comparison. They copy it from one another. This is complete bullshit because Python is 2 or 3 times slower than PHP. And I tell it to you because I love Python. I use Python for machine learning and for scripts all the time. And I would love Python to be faster because I love it. It's a very neat language, but man, Python is 2-3 times slower than PHP, especially modern PHP, PHP 7, 7.4, PHP 8. Python is slower. The Django is 2 times slower, sometimes even more. So PHP is very fast out of high-level languages. Like if you don't go into Go, if you don't go into Rust and stuff like that, PHP or Java is faster than PHP, but PHP is much easier to develop with. So out of those easy languages, PHP is way fastest. Okay, so Drupal has PHP on the back end, and good for it. It has Symfony. Okay, Symfony is great. I know that everybody rocks with Laravel. Maybe I'm a little bit jealous, but Drupal uses Symfony, and then on top of Symfony it adds Drupal API, and then you can also download custom modules. So this PHP plus Symfony is a framework level, and then with Drupal API it can be still used as a framework, but you can see that it kind of becomes too heavy at that point for microservices. So it's all that code, you know. But as a CMS and CMF content management framework, it's just perfect, being fast and also powerful and flexible at the same time. So this is what's at the back end. And at the front end, at the theming, it uses Twig. So Twig is a template language, also very powerful and flexible, built like it comes from Symfony. So this is what we have on the back end. It gives, like Twig and the theming layer, it gives the tools that the usual front-end gigs could use to build their systems. Sometimes, like I have seen websites that just drop all Drupal markup in their Twig files, and they build something own, and they just render output there. It's very, very flexible to do that. So let's look at the code base. I haven't done the overview of the modules and the UI, and it's a big thing. Let's do it some other time. Well, actually, you could say also that code base is a big thing, but let's just do the code base overview and stop here. Yes, enable Drupal support. Come on. Drupal 9? Yes, Drupal 9. All right. So the code base overview, let me open it with in a folder instead. You can see that in this overview, in this setup, Drupal resides in the folder called web. Because standard Drupal composer setup, it will move out the web folder and private folder and config folder outside. So we will start actually here, because if you download the zip file, you'll have those folders inside. But we have them outside. So config folder. Drupal allows exporting configuration of the website to propagate it to the server. Like if you edit content types, if you do changes to configuration of the website, its components, and then you want to propagate it to production or to staging, you can just export this config edit to Git pull and import at production, which is a big win. And it's YAML files. I haven't exported yet. It's just a fresh Drupal installation here. Then there is a private folder where will be stored files, like private files. Sometimes if you build a system for different organizations that have private files, meeting notes, PDFs, or files that they sell, you don't want it to be accessible inside the code base, and it's stored outside of the code base where it's not accessible directly with HTTP, and those files are managed by Drupal itself. Then like managed in a special way, because all files are managed by Drupal basically. What else here? Private, well, scripts is not a part of Drupal. It's a part of installation script. Then vendor is the folder with the libraries that Drupal is based on. It has libraries that are used in installation, that are used by Symfony, and Symfony is one of them, that are used Basically, these are PHP libraries that are used by Drupal. They're also stored outside because in this case, again, if you download it, it will be stored inside. I mean, if you go to drupal.org and download it as a zip, they'll be stored inside. And they're moved outside here because with Composer, they're managed by Composer. So they can be really kept outside of the code base. They're third-party libraries, actually. And then the web folder is where Drupal itself is stored. Now, if you look at the composer.json, this is actually the file, and I just modified it a little bit. It's basically Drupal standard. I installed some custom modules here. Actually, it's not as vanilla as I thought, but it just has some custom modules in it. Okay, we will not go into that right now, but you need to know that it's managed with Composer. And I heard some people complain that it's managed by Composer. Please, like, come on. I know that, like, even WordPress is not managed by Composer, but I've seen those modules that are used for WordPress. They use Composer all the time because you have to have all those libraries compatible with each other and compatible versions, and unless you use Composer, because it composes things together and keeps the compatible versions, and it actually checks which PHP version you have and if they are compatible with the libraries. If you don't have that, you will have big headache, and you will, like, if you complain about it using Composer, like, you cannot use modern PHP because, okay, and Node.js has npm to manage its versions. Python has a pip. Like, everybody manages versions because you cannot build reliable software without some kind of version manager. And Ruby has, it uses Composer and good for it. Let's go into, and don't complain about that. Web. In the web folder, it has the core folder where Drupal core is stored. And we'll look into that probably later, but it's like website inside website. It has its own assets, its own initial configuration. It has some functional programming here. Like, if you complain that it's not completely OOP, that it's not MVC, like that it has those functional chunks in it. Today, pure OOP is not popular anymore. Like, today is a comeback of functional programming. And what Drupal does is that it has functional programming where it needs to be, and it has OOP programming where it needs to be, and it's working together in a good way. We don't want it to, like some drunkard whom I have once seen on the street, he said, like, please, no fanatism, no fanatism. Okay, so it includes, it has some functional programming code. It's been removed and cleared up greatly since Drupal 7, but some of it is still usable. We still want to have some hooks. Then in the lib folder, it has some Drupal libraries, components. These are basically, this lib folder is like vendor folder, but vendor folder is third party, and lib folder is Drupal object-oriented code and classes and libraries. Okay, and it has components and it has core, and in the core it has those core libraries. It's a big one. So if you look at it, you can see that it's huge. Like, they took Symfony and then they built a lot on top of it. So code-wise, it's quite heavy. If you just want to build a microservice, that's why it can be an overkill, because it's lots of code on top. Now, one thing about performance of Drupal and that lots of code is that why Drupal is very performant still and why it's very fast is because that code is loaded with autoloader with OOP. So if that code is not used, sometimes it's not even loaded. That's one thing. If you run uncached Drupal against Drupal 9 against uncached Drupal 7, and Drupal 7 was like WordPress without OOP framework, without Symfony. So if you run uncached Drupal 8 or 9 against uncached Drupal 7, Drupal 9 will be slower, somewhat slower, actually like 30% to 50% slower. And this is because it still has more code, and generally OOP is slower than functional programming. That's just a fact. Don't argue with that. In this context, if it's C++, you can have very fast OOP, but in this context, OOP is slower than functional programming. So, like what I was saying is that Drupal 8, Drupal 9 is like 30 to 50%, well, more like 30% slower than Drupal 7. But if you enable caching, because Drupal 9 and Drupal 8 has very powerful caching system, like OOP and this re-architecture allowed to build very powerful caching, which is very precise. It's tag-based, it's context-based caching, where you don't just cache the whole page, but you can cache chunks of page and apply different context, like which user, which path, which context, basically, tells you how to cache this or this part of the page. And then there is also BigPipe module developed by Wim Leers that allows you to, like, it's my favorite because it allows you to render the page and then to render some very, very heavy chunks of the page. Like if you have some heavy processing blocks on the page, it renders them with JavaScript, which is just awesome and amazing. So yeah, we move on to the MISC folder. Yeah, it's just different JavaScript files, different icons, miscellaneous basically. Then the modules folder are the core modules, and we will look into them later. But here's that BigPipe, Ben, Color, Siki editor, JSON API, migration is in core, Node, RDF. We can talk about that later. But these are the core modules. That can also be, some of them cannot be disabled, some of them can be enabled or disabled as needed. Profiles are installation profiles. Basically, you can build a site that already has custom configuration, that like prepackaged website that like it can be used if you run a company which packs together some configuration, custom modules, custom themes for the clients, like a low start website. And like for like Drupal, or here's Umami demo website. Like if you install this profile, it will install a custom theme, it will install custom content, it will install custom modules in it. You can have a look what's inside. So it's like a packaged website basically inside its profile. You can package whatever you want inside. Then scripts, some scripts which Drupal uses, tests, and themes. So this is what's inside Drupal core. And if you create a custom or download custom theme or module, they go to the modules folder. Oh, no, I'm sorry, this is core. No, this is wrong. Okay. They don't go into core. Only core is in the core. So here is in the web folder, there is a themes folder where your themes will go. And there is a modules folder where your modules will go. Contrib modules are the third-party modules which you install with Composer. They'll go into the Contrib folder, and the modules which you write, custom modules, they'll go into custom folder inside the modules folder. Okay. So in the core profiles, these are core profiles. You can also install your custom profiles or write your custom profiles and put them in the profiles folder. It's empty now. So please don't confuse. There in the core folder, there's modules, themes, profiles folder, which belongs to Drupal, but your custom themes, modules, and contrib modules and profiles, they go into the root folder, modules, profiles, and themes correspondingly. Then there is a libraries folder. This is for front-end libraries, like Rated, jQuery, lazy sizes, and so on. It should also be managed by Composer, actually, because some modules and themes, they declare that, but it's not something that we'll go into now. And then finally there is a sites folder. Why it's called sites is because Drupal can allow to have a multi-site website. So then you have a default site where the default stuff is, and then you can have other sites in it. And actually inside your sites folder you can still have modules, libraries, and themes folder. If you want to have special libraries, special themes, and special modules which just belong to this subsite. In the default folder you have some, and if you have other sites, you will have folders for other sites. So it says default is a default site, but if it's like site B, site C, they'll have those site B folder, site C folder, and in them they also have files, like some compiled PHP, because Twig compiles into PHP, and Drupal container, actually it's Symfony container is saved into PHP. JavaScript, minimized JavaScript, compiled, optimized files go there. Image styles, images, and public files. The files that are not private, because we talked about private files stored here. So in the web folder there can be also public files that it's okay for, like images that are not secret, that are served to the website. They go to the site's files folder. And then there are also settings, because if we have a multi-site, we'll have different settings, different database, password, and stuff like that. they go into sites folders. Yeah, so this is the file structure. I hope this hasn't been too complex. Okay, so in the next lessons we can look into other things. We can look into the UI. If you have questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. And I hope this helps you to understand more what Drupal is. If you want to get inside Drupal and use its power to build flexible and powerful websites, then I hope this helps you. If you want to know more about when to use WordPress, when to use Drupal, and when to use Symfony or Laravel Raw, then you can also ask me. Okay, thank you for your attention, and I hope that this will help you to get into Drupal. Bye bye.